There is an operating system on Earth today that was born because another country tried to delete it. In 2019, Huawei was cut off from the American technology stack, and the single most dangerous sentence in its history was quietly spoken in boardrooms around the world. Google can turn this company's phones into bricks whenever it wants, because every Huawei smartphone ran Android, and Android's future could be revoked with one signature. The industry consensus was absolute. Nobody builds a third mobile ecosystem. It has never been done. Windows Phone died with billions of dollars behind it. BlackBerry died with the best keyboard and the most secure email on Earth. A sanctioned Chinese company, starting from zero, with no developers and no apps, had mathematically no chance. In the first quarter of 2026, that no-chance operating system, HarmonyOS, captured 19% of the Chinese smartphone market, overtaking Apple's iOS for second place. Huawei itself climbed to #1 in China. The HarmonyOS ecosystem now spans 1.3 billion connected devices, and the version running on those phones contains 0 lines of Android code. They did not fork the ecosystem. They burned the boats and built their own. This is happening right now, today, in 2026, and it is the closest anyone has ever come to breaking the two-party monopoly of the mobile world. If you want the full, meaty story, the microkernel proven secure by mathematical proof, the bus that fuses a phone and a car into one machine, the 7 billion yuan war chest, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel bring you more deep dives like this one. Let's get into it. To understand why HarmonyOS matters, you need to understand the duopoly it is attacking. And to be fair, the duopoly earned its throne. For the last 15 years, every smartphone of consequence on Earth has run one of two operating systems, Android or iOS. Together, they hold over 99% of the global mobile market. That is not a competitive market. That is a binary. Every app developer, every bank, every game studio, every government service on the planet builds for two platforms, and only two, and both platforms are genuinely excellent. Android gave the world cheap smartphones and open hardware variety. iOS gave the world smoothness, security, and the most lucrative app economy in history. The gravity of those two ecosystems is the strongest force in consumer technology. You do not compete with gravity. But here is the hidden cost, and for Huawei it was existential. Android is open source at the bottom, but the parts that make Android valuable, the Play Store, Gmail, Maps, push services, the Google Mobile Services package, are proprietary, American, and revocab, Lee. In 2019, under US government pressure, Google was forced to suspend business with Huawei. New Huawei phones lost the services that make an Android phone usable outside China. Overnight, a company selling 200 million phones a year discovered that the ground beneath its entire mobile business was rented, and the landlord had just changed the locks. Think about that for a second. That is not a metaphor. That is just the contract. Huawei's best hardware, its best cameras, its best chips, all of it sitting on top of software that could be switched off from 4,000 miles away. The old problem was this: Huawei needed an operating system to survive. But an operating system is not a product you build. It is a country you colonize. Developers, apps, habits, muscle memory. Building one from zero, while sanctioned, while the two incumbents hold 99% of the world, felt like a problem with no real solution. Until Huawei stopped trying to build a phone operating system and started building something the incumbents could not see as a threat, because it was not aimed at phones at all. So here is the question everyone asked in 2019. If depending on Android is a kill switch, why has nobody ever built a third ecosystem? The graveyard is deep, and every corpse in it was richer than sanctioned Huawei. Windows Phone, Microsoft spent billions, bought Nokia, paid developers to port apps, and still died below 5% share. BlackBerry, Tizen from Samsung, Sailfish, Firefox OS, Eliun OS from Alibaba, which Google publicly pressured manufacturers to abandon in 2011, killing it before it was born. Every single attempt was crushed by the same force: software gravity. Users go where the apps are, and developers go where the users are. It is a locked circle, and nobody has ever picked the lock. And honestly, for its first 4 years, HarmonyOS looked like the next corpse. The dismissive nickname in the Western tech press was brutal and at the time accurate: an Android skin. Because early HarmonyOS really did run Android apps. Under the hood, it carried AOSP code, the open source body of Android, precisely so that Huawei phones would not die on the day the sanctions landed. It was a life raft, not a ship. The weaknesses were specific and brutal. Weakness 1. Zero native gravity. An OS that runs someone else's apps is a tenant, not an owner. As long as HarmonyOS depended on Android apps, every developer's rational move was to keep building for Android first, forever. Weakness 2. No developers. By 2021, Huawei had signed up millions of developers on paper, but paper sign-ups are not shipped apps. The app gallery was a desert compared to the Play Store's millions of titles. Weakness 3. The trust deficit abroad. Outside China, a Huawei phone without Google services was, for most humans, simply not a phone. The ecosystem had no beachhead beyond the domestic market. Weakness 4. The architectural question. Critics said HarmonyOS was marketing, a rebranded Android with a distributed features brochure stapled on top. Without a clean break, the nickname would never die. So the rational forecast stood. Huawei will maintain a domestic Android fork, the world will ignore it, and the duopoly will remain a duopoly. That forecast was correct for about 4 years, right up until Huawei did the one thing no failed ecosystem ever dared to do. It deleted the life raft. Here is the twist, and this is the part that changes everything. HarmonyOS was never designed as a phone operating system competing with Android on Android's battlefield. It was designed as a single operating system for every machine a human owns. Phone, watch, earbuds, TV, camera, car cockpit, factory sensor. Huawei's internal name for the strategy was 1 + 8 + N. One phone, 8 categories of devices, N unlimited things. And inside that strategy hides the reframe that broke the graveyard's curse. Do not colonize the phone first. Colonize the billion small devices first, and let the phone join the federation later. Let me walk through the mechanism, layer by layer, because the engineering is the story. Step 1. The microkernel. Traditional operating systems, Android, Linux, Windows, run on a monolithic kernel. One giant privileged program where a bug in the audio driver can crash the whole machine. HarmonyOS was built around a microkernel, a tiny core that does only scheduling and messaging, with everything else running outside it as isolated modules. A tiny kernel can be formally verified, meaning mathematicians prove, line by logical line, that entire classes of vulnerabilities cannot exist in it. This is not marketing language. Formal verification is the same technique used on Cell 4, a research microkernel famous for being the only general-purpose kernel ever comprehensively machine-proven. Huawei applied that discipline to the trusted core of a consumer OS. When your company can be attacked by the most powerful government on Earth, a kernel you can mathematically audit is not a feature, it is armor. Step 2. The performance physics. Microkernels historically had one fatal flaw: messages between modules cross boundaries constantly, and the crossing is slow. Huawei's answer was a redesigned high-performance inter-process communication layer that, by its own published measurements, runs up to 5 times more efficiently than conventional systems, cutting a application response latency by 25.7%. Add a deterministic latency engine that schedules tasks with real-time guarantees, and the microkernel stops being a compromise. It becomes faster than the monolith. Step 3. The distributed softbus. This is the idea that makes HarmonyOS genuinely different from anything on the market. The softbus collapses separate devices into one logical machine. Your phone, your watch, your earbuds, your TV, your car discover each other, negotiate bandwidth, and fuse into what Huawei calls a super device. One compute fabric, where the camera of one device can become the eye of another, and the screen of another can become your display. There is a distributed file system giving every node a single coherent view of data across the whole fabric. The operating system stops being a thing inside a phone. It becomes a field that your devices sit inside. Step 4. The burn the boats moment. In 2024, Huawei shipped HarmonyOS Next, the pure-blood version. No AOSP, no Android apps. A phone that will not install an Android package, ever. This was the decision every dead ecosystem was too afraid to make. Accept short-term pain. Force every developer to write native code, or be absent, and own your destiny. The native language and compiler stack, ArcTS and the Arc compiler, were built to let one codebase deploy across every device class in the Federation. Write once, run on the watch and the car and the phone. Step 5. Give the foundation away. Huawei donated the non-Android core of the system to the Open Atom Foundation as Open Harmony, an open-source codebase that has grown past 100 million lines and, by later counts, 30 million lines of code, with thousands of contributors and dozens of commercial distributions built on top of it. This is the judo move. By making the base layer a national and industrial commons, HarmonyOS stops being one company's product and becomes infrastructure that Chinese appliance makers, banks, and industrial firms all have a stake in defending. And here is the brilliant part: the four old weaknesses. No gravity, no developers, no trust abroad, the Android skin stigma. They do not get fixed one by one. They collapse together because the substrate changed. The ecosystem did not have to win the phone first. It won the watch, the TV, the router, the car, the factory sensor, and arrived at the phone with 1.3 billion devices already speaking the language. The stigma died the day Android support was deleted, and the developer desert got irrigated with state-scale money. That is not a metaphor. That is just the architecture. But architecture slides are one thing, market share is another. And this is where the story stops being a brave experiment and becomes an industrial fact. The numbers, in order of brutality to the duopoly. In the first quarter of 2024, Counterpoint Research recorded HarmonyOS passing iOS in China for the first time. By the first quarter of 2026, HarmonyOS held 19% of the Chinese smartphone market, again above iOS, while Huawei itself took the #1 spot in Chinese smartphone sales in January of 2026. One analyst noted the platform grew roughly 9-fold in 12 months and could overtake Chrome OS globally by 2027. Now the ecosystem scale. Huawei reports the HarmonyOS device ecosystem passed 1.3 billion connected units. Phones, tablets, PCs, wearables, vehicles. The pure native branch, HarmonyOS Next, crossed 32 million devices by the end of 2025. On the software side, the native app catalog sits around 350,000 apps and meta services, with over 10 million registered developers. And HarmonyOS 6 alone accumulated tens of millions of installs within months of its October 2025 rollout, ahead of the Mate 80 launch. And the money behind it is real and named. Huawei committed 7 billion yuan, roughly $1 billion, to fund native app development, meta services, and developer innovation, and publicly pledged to train over 100,000 HarmonyOS developers every single month. Remember the top 5,000 apps math. Adapting the 5,000 apps that cover the overwhelming majority of daily usage was the beachhead. The beachhead is done. The platform itself keeps shipping. HarmonyOS 6 brought a 15% performance lift over HarmonyOS 5, and up to 40% over older devices, plus system-wide tap to share across more than 60 major apps. HarmonyOS 6.1 added new privacy controls. HarmonyOS 7 is slated to be unveiled at the HDC 2026 Developer Conference, with OpenHarmony 7 beta code already appearing in the open, and the factory rollout of HarmonyOS Next devices is moving to phased global expansion during 2026, the first serious attempt to take the third ecosystem beyond the domestic wall. Zoom out to the institutional layer, and the geometry is unmistakable. This is not one company's operating system anymore. OpenHarmony sits inside the Open Atom Foundation, China's first national open-source foundation, the same state that mandates domestic OS and government buys Harmony-compatible appliances. The same industrial policy that backed Kirin Silicon and Kylin desktops now has a mobile layer to complete the stack. Chinese chip, Chinese kernel, Chinese desktop, Chinese mobile OS, Chinese appicon, OMI. Every layer answers to one jurisdiction. This is happening right now, today, in 2026. The graveyard of dead third ecosystems just got its first survivor. But here is the honest part of this story, and I want to be straight with you, because this format does not do blind hype. HarmonyOS has won at home. Outside China, it is still a ghost. A HarmonyOS phone in Berlin or Jakarta ships without Google mobile services, no Play Store, no Maps, no WhatsApp out of the box. And 350,000 native apps is a real ecosystem. The way a young forest is a real forest, alive, growing, and nothing like the old growth of Android's several million. The global rollout in 2026 will be fought street by street against 99% duopoly gravity, and gravity does not tire. Second, The developer economics are still subsidized. A large share of native app development is being pulled forward by Huawei's 7 billion yuan fund and by the leverage of the domestic market itself. Whether developers keep building for HarmonyOS when the subsidies thin is an open question that only time answers. Third, openness has edges. Open Harmony is genuinely open and genuinely multi-vendor, but the foundation's center of gravity is Chinese and Western institutional wariness, including scrutiny from bodies like the Eclipse Founda, CN's counterparts in Washington, means the global contributor base remains thinner than the code base deserves. And like any young OS, it has real vulnerabilities published under real CVE numbers. Formal verification covers the trusted core, not the entire continent of software built above it. None of this erases what the market data has already proven. It simply marks the distance between surviving at home and conquering abroad. 19% in China. Number 1 in its home market. 1.3 billion devices. 0 Android code. The rest is geography, money, and time, which brings us back to the bigger picture this whole story has been building toward. Because this was never about phones. It was about whether a civilization can own the layer its daily life runs on. For 15 years, the mobile world was a two-party system, and the parties were both answerable to Washington. That arrangement built the app economy. And it also meant that the pocket of every human on Earth sat inside one legal perimeter. Sanctions turned that perimeter from an abstraction into a weapon. And Huawei, the company standing exactly on the fault line, responded by doing the thing the graveyard said was impossible, growing a third ecosystem from nothing, under embargo, in 7 years. And notice what completes here. Chinese silicon that no longer needs permission. A domestic desktop OS evicting Windows from the state, a mobile OS evicting Android from the pocket, an open instruction set underneath it all. The stack is closing layer by layer, and HarmonyOS is the layer ordinary humans actually touch. The world that ran on 2 operating systems didn't announce its own ending. It just started sharing its screen with a third one that was never supposed to boot. So here is the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. If a third ecosystem can survive a full American embargo, what happens when it goes global? Does the world converge back onto one digital commons? Or are we watching the mobile internet split into rallospheres that will never fully speak to each other again? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. And if you want a front row seat for the next time a graveyard law gets broken, hit subscribe. The next few years of this story are going to move faster than anyone expects, and you are going to want to be here for it. I'll see you in the next one.